Well, welcome everyone to our webinar about IGEMS nesting. Just about 12 o'clock, so we'll get going here. There's a question box that you can type any questions in as we're going along here, or chat box, and I'll try to monitor those. I think on my last webinar, I wasn't paying a lot of attention to some of the questions that were being typed in, but hopefully I'll do a better job of that today. So, should run about 40-45 minutes. I like to always warn people ahead of time that this is not a have a light overview, kind of going deep into the weeds of IGEMS and the nesting and how it all works. So it's meant to give somebody good familiarity if you're looking at getting into CAD/CAM software, or you've been using IGEMS, but you want to learn a little bit more about an area maybe you haven't gotten into before. So with that, we'll just get rid of that. So first of all, if you missed the last webinar or you want to review it, is in a couple places on our website, wardjet.com. If you go to the learn area and support area, go down IGEMS training, scroll down a bit there, and there's the area we've got the webinars. So well, over a month ago, we did the 5-axis webinar. These are older ones that'll slowly be replaced as I go through these again, and then other shorter videos about different aspects of IGEMS. Or you can go to our YouTube channel. So just go to YouTube, search for Wardjet, and you come to our page here, and then we've got the 5-axis webinar there, as well as some other videos. And then if you want to test out IGEMS, you can go to their website, igems.se, and you can download it. The main page there, there'll be a download link there. And then they've just recently released this subscription method of getting into IGEMS. So previously you would buy a seat of IGEMS and pay basically up front. And then what they've done now with the subscription plan is for a little bit lower yearly fee, either $1,400 for a 2D package, which gives you everything except the 5-axis capability. You can use IGEMS, and then at the end of that year, pay that $1,400 again and keep going with it, or when you stop paying, then the IGEMS will just stop working. So then the other option is we've got the 3D module, which is $3,400 per year. And then that allows people with 5-axis heads to do things like program off of step files and such. So that's a couple different options on that. So just briefly, a couple cameras on our floor here just to show you what's coming through the shop right now. So we've got actually a run of our water-only J-series machines. So we've got 3 of them in different stages of being built here. And that's kind of dovetails into a little bit what we'll be talking about with the nesting. So usually with water-only systems, people are cutting with multiple heads, and they're working off of rolls and very high volume production, which is where, of course, nesting can really come in handy. So we've got this machine here that's pretty much ready. We've got a machine back here that's maybe a week behind that one. And then if I go to another camera from the other end of that same bay, then there's a tank for a 3rd machine here, water only machine. And these are the tables that will be going with that. So this one here is a pinch feed roller, pinch the material and help feed it into the cutting envelope. So let's get into the IGEMS area here. So I've already imported some parts and put toolpaths on here. So if you're not familiar with how to do that, you can look at one of the previous webinars. Once you've got your geometries in and you're ready to nest, then that's where we're picking up here. So with the nesting module, you get the nesting tab, and you've got a couple different ways of creating sheets to nest these parts onto. So first of all, you can click on this create button here, and if I hit enter, it's gonna bring me up a list of my standard sheet sizes that I've told it that I typically work with. So if I wanna work with a 120 by 60, I can put that in here. In this dialog box, you can specify things like the collar width that you want on there, and whether you wanna use clamp zones, which I'll show you here in a bit. And so I'll just click on OK and put that on here. And then you can specify the orientation that you're gonna be cutting this on your sheet by just moving your mouse around. So we zoom in here, you'll see this shaded area here. So this is a clamp zone. So if you want to give yourself additional room for clamping, then you can specify clamp zones left, right, top, and bottom on the sheet. To actually specify those clamp zones, if you go up into your machine database, then you can specify that. So click on this little machine icon here, and on the table layout tab, if you scroll down towards the bottom, you've got the option to use clamp zones and then how much you want to allow for your clamps. And then if you decide that you want to take that off, you can just double click on your sheet, come in here and disable that. So that's one way of making a sheet. Another way of making a sheet is they've got this rectangle command here. So with this, you can click on this and left click, and then you can type in your dimensions. So if I want to do a 96 by 48 inch sheet here, I'll do that, 96/48. So that's another way. You can also import sheets from a remnant library. So I've already told IGEMS that I'm working with mild steel 1/4 inch, and under the Sheets tab, there's the option to open a scrap sheet file where you can store your remnant sheets. And I'll show you later how we make these remnant sheets. If I wanted to nest things onto here, I can click onto this and I can either do Control-C for copy or Control-V for cut, and then go to my other workspace up here. So, and then I Control-V and paste this into my workspace. And then another way to create a sheet is to just draw things. So if I wanted to draw a remnant, I'll just draw a couple rectangles here and trim it up. So I'll do something like this. And then I'm just going to use on my CAD tab, I've got trim command, T for trim. I'm going to trim this up. And then before I try to make a sheet out of this, I have to join this together as one polyline. If it isn't right now, it's 2 different polylines. So I can click on those and then click on join. Join tolerance of 0 is fine. And now this is one continuous polyline that I can make a sheet out of. So now if I go back to my sheets area here, click on create. So when I did the first sheet, I clicked on standard sheet, brought up my list of standard sheets. If instead I click on an object, then I can make a sheet out of that. And we've got our web around there. Let me just back up one step. One other thing you can also do is you can draw in other geometries. So if you've cut something out of here already, you can draw that in. So if I do this, just have to note that when you create the sheet out of something like this, it will put that 1/4 inch collar width around the outside, but there is no collar width around this portion here. So if you're going to draw something like I've done here, you just want to make it a little bit bigger so that it doesn't nest parts too close to that void in the sheet there. So now we've got our sheets. We're just going to go ahead and nest that. So we can go to our nesting tab, click on the auto button here. So I usually focus on the auto nest button. There are these other nesting algorithms that you can use. I generally use the auto one because it's the most powerful one. Once you start that, down at the bottom, it'll prompt you to select parts. So you can just drag a box around the parts that you've brought in. And let's see, let me ask, is everybody hearing me okay? Just show of hands that people are hearing me okay. Had somebody ask whether we were running late or not, and I just want to make sure that everybody's still hearing me fine. So we've selected our parts, and now we're going to select our sheets. And let me just type in an answer here to this person. Okay. So in this dialog box here, we've got 3 tabs up here. So we've got the parts that we've selected and their quantities. And then you've got a box over here that shows information about the currently selected part. So if we'll go up to the top of the list here. So this part here, we've got our quantity, whether it's a fill part. So if there's a part that you know you're gonna need a lot of over the next few months, you can also specify that I need 10 of them today, but then I know I'm gonna need another X number over the next few months, and you can plug a number in there. I'm gonna do that in a little bit smaller part because that's a fairly big part. If you have any grain restrictions, rotation restrictions, you can specify that in here. So if we always want to position this oriented in either this orientation or spun 180, you can do that. If you want something to show up earlier on the nest, you can specify a priority, and whether you want to allow common cutting on the part, which we'll show you that on some water-only cuts that we're going to do, whether you want to allow it to use holes in the part to nest smaller parts into, and then size of the part here. So you've got that information for all the different parts down here. On the Sheets tab, we've got the sheets that we've selected. So you can, if you need to edit anything on here, you decide you want to change color width, things like that, you can change that on here. If you want to force it to use like your remnant sheet here first, you can go into priority and set this to a higher priority and do the same thing for your other sheets. So if this 5x10 sheet, if you've got multiples of that, you can specify how many you have available to nest on, and that should take care of that. You can also specify whether you want to use the sheets in the list order, so you can use these arrows here to reorder these on the sheet and use them in that order. All right, so then we're going to come back to the Groups tab here in a bit. So over here on the right, you've got information pertaining to things like how close you want to nest your parts together. Up here, if you have different machines, maybe you have, in this case, an abrasive machine and a water-only machine, and they've got some different characteristics as far as how they're nested, you can set up different profiles for your different machines up here, and you got your plus and minus button to add or delete new ones if you need to. Auto save is checked, so if you make any changes, it'll keep those for the next time that you come in here. Part distance is from the material file, so I can show you where that is later. That's where that's coming from. If you want to override this, you can uncheck this box and you can specify whatever distance you want to. And then where you want to start your nesting from on the sheet. So you got your different options there, as well as how you want to work your way through the sheet. Start in the corner, automatic will just do what it sees as the best, or do you want to work around along your X and Y axes? And then multiplicity, we'll talk about in a bit, whether you want to allow it to mirror parts or flip parts over. And then also fillers after frontline, we'll show you here in a bit when I do a part with some fillers. So, and then here we'll do with one head right now. So if you do have a machine with multiple cutting heads, you can specify how many heads that you want to use for the nesting. Right now, we're just going to do a single head. And then if you want to do common line cutting, which again, we'll show you that on some water only nesting that we'll do here. And then you can do your nesting by optimization by material utilization or by material values. So when you're putting your sheets in, you can also specify the value of that sheet, and you could tell it to optimize based on that. And if this removed finished parts box is checked, when it does the nesting, all the parts that get nested onto a sheet will disappear from over here on the left. I usually myself leave that unchecked, so in case I want to nest anything else, they'll be there so I can choose from them later. So we'll go ahead and click on nest and see what happens here. So yeah, so somebody asked a question about using IGEMS for nesting for multiple heads. So there's a couple of ways that people will nest for multiple heads. They might just, if they say have 3 heads on their machine, take the sheet, in this case here, we've got a 120 sheet, they might take gems or use it putting all the parts on a 40-inch by 60 sheet, and then create a nest or CNC file, all 3 or slid 1 and do it that way. IGEMS, if you do have multiple heads, which I'll show you here in a bit, gives you some more flexibility as far as if you have dynamic or motorized head spacing, where you can have it automatically change the spacing of the heads as it goes through the nest here. So as it's going along here, so to put parts on here, shows us over here in this dialog parts box here, how many parts that it's nested, as well as idea of material utilization. So you can let this go on for a while, depending on how many parts you have on here. Ultimately, if you're happy with what you've got, you can click on stop and then click on OK, and it'll come back to here. So then at this point, we would set our 0 point on a sheet. So on our CAM tab, click on order, drag a box around a sheet, hit enter, and puts our cut sequence on that sheet. which again, we covered a bit in the last webinar as far as how you can change your cut sequence on the sheet itself. So I'm gonna back up here and go into some of those other settings that were in there. So I'll just go back and nest again. So we'll select those parts, and I'm just gonna select one sheet for right now so I can show you some of the other settings in here. So first of all, this multiplicity thing, we'll show you that. So this will make multiple sheets the same if it can, to reduce the number of CNC files that you have to load at the machine. So I'm going to change the sheet quantity to 10, and we're just going to nest onto that for right now. And it'll make, in this case, 2 separate sheets. If I click on this, it'll show us these 2 separate sheets here. If there's enough parts, and maybe I'll actually put it onto a smaller sheet here. Let me just put on let's put on a 60 by 60 sheet, because this will probably show it a little bit better. All right, so we'll nest it onto here. Oh, of course, I have to tell it that I got more sheets. All right, so right now we've got 4 individual sheets to do those 143 parts. If I turn on multiplicity, we'll see if it does it differently. So in this case here, with the multiplicity turned on, it's going to make 2 nests. So this nest down here at the bottom, you'd run 3 times, and then this nest up here at the top, you'd run once. So that's the multiplicity button. The other button is, I was going to talk about, was the fillers after frontline. So I'm actually going to go back and just go back to our 5 by 10 sheet. And okay, say 10 of those. All right, and then what we'll do is one of these smaller parts down here at the bottom, we'll go ahead and tell it that this is a fill part, and so we'll need 10 of them today, but we could potentially use up to 100 over the next month or so. And I'm gonna leave fillers after frontline turned off for right now and see what happens now. So with fillers after frontline turned on, what it's not after frontline turned on is it's not going to put any of the fill parts beyond the furthest extent that it's nesting the parts that we absolutely need. So it's not going to put any fill parts in this area here with the filler after frontlines turned off. If I turn that on, then it will fill up the rest of the sheet with those fill parts. So that's the fillers after frontline box. And as you may have seen down here, you got ways of separating out your parts depending on what you're trying to identify. And then the other thing that we can do here is, we'll turn that off for now, we'll go to multiple tools. So if I want to nest onto a 5 by 10 sheet and I've got 3 heads available on the machine, so I'm telling I got 3 heads. You can tell it to either do dynamic head spacing. So if you a machine that has motorized Y spacing, I've actually got a little video here that I can show you that, hopefully. Let me see if I can show that. All right. So the other option is if you tell it you got constant, then it'll just set the heads to a constant distance at the beginning of the sheet, and either through the program or manually, the operator would set the head distance. So in this case here, we've got 3 cutting heads and a 5 by 10 sheet, then it's going to divide that minus the collar width that we have on each side to that sort of head spacing. So we'll go ahead and do this nest first. There may not be a huge difference between the dynamic and the constant, but we'll see what comes up. So here we'd see on this nest here, so these parts here are going to be cut with head 1, and then the gray parts with head 2. And then there's also some single parts here that, based on where they are on the sheet, are going to be cut either 1, 2, or 3 as a single head program. And somebody asked what the different colors mean. So yeah, the different colors can be depending on what you choose over here, whether you just want to see the different parts in the sheet, whether you want to see different layouts, priority if we had put any priorities on that, and then groups I'll show you in here in a bit, but we don't have any groups right now, so that's what the different colors are. So if I go ahead and click on OK, and I go ahead and add my cut sequence to one of these sheets here, like this one here, because this one's kind of interesting how it laid this one out. So you see here that these parts are cut with head 1, and then we've got this part here that's cut with head 2, and then we've got parts here that are cut with head 3, and then I'll go back and do some more, and then it goes in and does the rest with heads 1, 2, 3, heads 3, things like that. So it's a really powerful tool if you are doing multi-head cutting and you really want to optimize your nesting. You can really do that with the dynamic head spacing program. So if I click on this sort button here with tool optimization turned on, it's going to minimize the number of tool changes that there are going through the sheet. Also, zone detection determines whether parts are being cut with head 1, 2, or 3. So with zone detection turned on, it looks at these parts here and realizes that those have to be cut with head 2, and then these parts over here have to be cut with head 3. So if we go back, let me undo that again here, or just undo. All right, so we'll go ahead and nest again. So the other thing I'll show you in here is the groups tab. So if you have multiple parts that you want to keep together on a sheet because they're part of a kit, that's what the groups tab is for. So if I want to set up a new group, go into the groups tab, click on this to create a group, and then you can choose what parts to go in that group. So if I want, say, these 3 parts to go together in this group here, I can specify those. And then you can specify how many parts go together to make the group. So if you need 2 of these and 2 of these to make the group, and then 1 of those, then you've got that. And then you can specify how many of those groups that you want. So we'll say that we want 10 of those. And then you can also make another group. So you click on this plus button again, you can make a new group, and we'll do 10, 11, and 12 for that group. And again, specify, all right, we'll do 1, 2, and 2, and we'll take 5 of those groups. So to show this a little bit better, I'll go on and just delete all these other parts for right now, because that one's in my group. Let's see, because we had 10, 11, and 12. So we'll leave that in there. We'll just delete these other ones. We'll leave 7, 8, and 9 as part of a group. And then, so this would be if we wanted additional ones, we can specify this quantity here. So I zero out these quantities. That won't give me any individual parts, and it'll only give me quantities based on the groups that I have set here. And then we're gonna do this again on a smaller sheet, so hopefully it shows a little bit better what's happening. And we'll go with 10 sheets. All right, I had my multiple cutting heads turned on. Let's turn that off right now. So then it's basically gonna keep groups together on a sheet. So it's not gonna split the parts across the sheet if they're part of the same group. And I can see that if I click on this groups button here. So all the aqua parts there are part of a group, and then all the pink parts are part of that other group that we made. Now, if maybe one of these parts here is a consumable part, and we know we're gonna want some spares, then that's where on this parts tab, you can then specify extra parts here. So if you say, all right, we'll take 2 more of each of these, and you can select multiple things at a time here by holding down your shift key, and we'll do quantity of 2 for all those. And we'll go ahead and nest again. So again, the colored parts are the grouped parts, and then the gray parts are the parts that were the extra ones that I put on there. So those ones, of course, will split across sheets, but it'll keep the groups together. And click on stop and okay. And then also handy tool on this Nest tab here is this browser button up here. So click on this and then it will show you a listing of the parts that are in your workspace. So if I click on this, then it shows me where that part is. So this part hasn't been nested, so it just shows it over there. And you can go down and you can see the quantities requested and the quantities nested and click on those and see where they are. So right now it's showing us just parts that still need to be nested. Up here at the top, there's this view all button box here. You click this and then it'll show all the parts that are in my workspace, the ones that have been completely nested. It shows in different color, and then these ones are in red because I manually overrode the number of parts, so it nested 12 out of the original 10 of those and so on. So that's that. The other thing on this tab here is this import button. So if you currently have a file open, so in the background here, you can see I have this other file open here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 out of Cornish mild steel. If I click on the import button, it'll show me any other files that I currently have open of the same material and thickness that I have available to put into this nest. So if I double click on this, then I can put it over here. So if you've got another file open, you can use that import tab here to import that. And then the cleanup drawing will just remove any of the parts that are in your workspace right now that have been completely nested. So over here, those parts disappeared because they were totally nested. So we've got that. And then what I'll do here is do a little bit of water only nesting. So I'm gonna go over to this workspace here. So water only application, probably cutting some maybe acoustic foam. Let me see if I can show another video here of one of our J series machines. See how this goes. So I'll pause that for now, but basically with that pinch feed roller and roll of material, you can feed it in and continuously cut a full roll of material. Let's go back to sharing my screen again. All right. So a couple ways of doing that. You can either nest it onto individual rectangles of your cutting envelope, or you can nest onto something representing the entire length of your roll of material. And then you can basically set up obstacles here based on the extent of your cutting envelope where it's not going to nest things into. So we'll go ahead and, so I've already told it that we've got a water only machine here, and I'll click on my auto button and I'll select these parts. And so if I just want to nest it onto a sheet like that, I can select that and again, tell it how many sheets of that I have available. So, and since this is a different machine, I'm going to switch over to my water only machine, which can have, again, different settings as far as where the start corner is and gaps. And we'll go ahead and do common line cutting on this one. So if we check common line cutting, it'll find straight edges that it can put together and use one cut to separate multiple parts. So we'll go ahead and click on nest on that. And go to layout mode here. So it shows in red the areas where it sees the potential of doing a common line cut. Now we haven't added the toolpath on here yet. We'll do that in the next step. So if we want to do like that, can click on stop. And then to actually add the common line cuts onto here on our cam tab, can click on here and go into the toolpath area. And we have the option for common. And basically click on OK here and select the sheet, and puts our common cuts here. So we'll do one cut to separate those two pieces there, and then can do the same thing for the other sheets. So this one here, we've got a little bit of a gap here. If you can put your material on there because you have a fixture, or like that video I was showing you where it has a guide where it's going to guide that material in, you can actually nest it right up against the edge of that sheet of material and use that as your raw edge and not have to do this cut that's along there. So if you want to do something like that, then we would just change our border on our sheet. So rather than having a border on here, you can click on here and tell it not to use the collar. Now at the beginning of the sheet, if we're not sure if we got a perfectly straight edge of the border of the sheet, then this is where that clamp zones thing can come in handy. And so it won't nest in the first inch or so of the sheet, depending on what you got set for your clamp zone. And then we can go ahead and nest onto there again. So we'll do our nest and select the sheet we want to nest onto. And again, I'll tell it however many sheets and nest and tell it common cutting. And so now we'll see that it nests it right up against the edge of the sheet there, and can click on stop and OK. And if I go back to the Cam tab, toolpath, common menu, there's this box down here, trim to sheet. So if that's checked, then when it puts the toolpath on there, it's not going to put a toolpath on that edge, and you can save yourself a little bit of a cutting time there. So the other thing that comes up sometimes, of course, is wanting to cut off at the end of the sheet. So we've got this remnant area here, and we don't want, we want a nice square edge there potentially. So what you can do is draw in a line at that where you want to have a cutoff, and then there's a command to add that on there. So if I add my cutoff from here, and I just draw a line straight down perpendicular to that edge there. So on the Cam tab underneath toolpath, there's the cutoff option. So you can choose what speed you want to cut it at, click on OK, click on the line, and then after it cuts all the parts, then it'll come and do the cutoff here. So if I add my 0 point on here for my sheet, so it's got the common cuts that it'll do, and then it'll do the cutoff. So let's take a look at what this is going to do on our simulation. And let me resize this here a bit. So all of those are common cuts. And then I drew my line, I guess, a little bit too long there because I had that error message, but at this point here would then cut up across that point there. So let me change that line here a little bit. And backspace, and let me add my cutoff again. And let's see, let me just move this point in a little bit. See if that's enough. Of course, I didn't add that to my cut sequence, so let me close that. So toolpath and cutoff, and okay, click on that. Set my 0 point. There we go. All right, so at the end, then we should get the little cutoff there. So it'll come to here and then cuts across and stops at this point here. So even though I drew that line all the way from the top of the sheet all the way down, because it knows it's already got the toolpath there, it's gonna stop right here at the edge of that part. And then finally, once you're done processing your sheet, you want to put something back into inventory. There is the option under the sheet area here to lock your sheet. So if I click on this lock button here, so that's how I got that original remnant sheet that I showed early on. You can select your sheet and it'll go through and recognize couple different sheets here and it breaks this up. So obviously this here you want to keep, but breaks this up, and then you can take this and you can inventory that. So I'll just move this away from here so we can see that. So if you want to put that into your inventory, then you can go to the sheet area and click on export, export to scrap, and select what you want to export to scrap, and it makes a scrap file with that, and then later you can come in and bring that into your workspace if you want to nest other things onto that. And then if you did want to nest it rather on a roll of material, works basically the same way. Click on our auto button, click our parts, hit enter, click our sheets and obstacles. So obstacles would be the white rectangles that I've drawn in here to represent the end of my cutting envelope. And let's see, since I've actually, let me undo because I've already used up all my quantities when I nested these other ones here. So we'll just undo what I've done over here. All right, auto, select those, select my sheet and my obstacles. So we've got our different quantities here, and I'll go ahead and click on nest. So because I've got these rectangles on in here and I've told it that these are obstacles, it's not going to nest things on those. So we've got our different cutting envelopes here. And then like we did before at this point, we would go through and add our common cut lines to this. And so the operator would just load one program. It's going to cut everything in one cut zone, advance the chain, cut the next cut zone, and continue on like that. So a couple different ways of programming for a machine that's got a roll processor on it or a roll on it. So I think that's most of what I wanted to cover here. And there are some other things that you can do under the sheet submenu here. So if you, for example, let me go back to my other one here, this one here. So if you nest parts like this and you want to make sheets out of these larger drops here, under the sheet submenu, you've got the from whole option here. So you can click on this and click on areas inside of a part, and you can make sheets out of remnants like that. Inventory will look at a sheet and determine potential sizes, rectangles that you can make out of that sheet that you can then export to your library and use those later. And then unlock, so if you do lock a sheet, you want to unlock it later, you can click on that and it'll show you the names of the parts that were cut out of that sheet. You can also click on the history button, click on a sheet, and it'll show you the names of the parts that were cut out of that sheet and the quantity of each of those. So that pretty much covers what I was hoping to go through today. I actually should point out there is a report function. That's probably a good thing to show you. Click on the report button here. You can select sheets, and then it'll show you information as far as material utilization and parts that were on the sheet and such. Any of these reports can be customized. So if you want to put your logo on there, you can. So here we got 3 sheets, total number of parts, and utilization for the overall job as well as the individual sheets. Let's see, somebody asked about abrasive cutting and common line cutting. You have to be a little bit more careful with abrasive cutting that parts don't tip up. Usually you're probably not going to want to common line cut parts that are smaller than say maybe 18 inches or so. So you want to make sure that they're going to lay nice and flat on the table. Water only cutting is not nearly as dangerous, but certainly with abrasive cutting you do have to watch that the parts don't tip up and risk breaking a nozzle. So with that, I will sign off and hope you all enjoyed this and everybody have a great weekend.